You've been deceiving me all this time. Take responsibility and support me. This is an order.
What is he talking about? I haven't deceived him. He's just misunderstood everything on his own. Why did I ever fall for someone like him? I almost cursed myself for not seeing the kind of man he really is. My name is Belle. I am a 27-year-old office worker. After graduating from college, I got a job at a fairly major company in my hometown. I remember being so happy when I received the job offer. I lost my mother to illness early in life and have lived with my strict father since. But when I got the job, he smiled broadly and said,
"That's great."
On the day of the entrance ceremony, I met an unbelievable person. As the ceremony was nearing its end, one of the new male employees suddenly stood up, went to the stage, and said,
"I want to make this company even bigger. Only those who are willing should follow me."
Everyone present was dumbfounded. I thought to myself, everyone must be thinking the same thing. There is a weird one among us. As we were all stunned, the CEO yelled,
"Jim, what are you talking about?"
He's the boss, son? Suddenly, I became worried about the future of this company. The closing remarks were given by the CEO. Of course, he started with,
"I apologize for earlier."
The son, Jim, was blushing, laughed at by those around him. Man, isn't he embarrassed? Afterwards, we were assigned to our departments, and I ended up with Jim.
Let's get along as fellow newbies.
He's quite a character. Can I really work with him? And so my corporate life began. I was anxious, but Jim turned out to be serious and always quick to apologize for his mistakes. I thought to myself that I couldn't be outdone and worked hard. Gradually, Jim and I became good rivals and friends.
"Bill, let's go out for dinner tonight."
Sure, the usual place? Hearing our conversations, our seniors often teased us. By then, I was slightly interested in the straightforward Jim, so I didn't mind the teasing. However, Jim always denied it, saying,
"It's not like that."
I knew then that he wasn't interested in me that way. I didn't want to confess and make things awkward, so I was content with our relationship as it was. But then he said,
"I want to date you. I've always liked you. And of course, with marriage in mind."
I was so happy. I cried. When I asked him why he always denied our relationship, he said he was just embarrassed. Seeing him blush in front of me, I smiled and said, "Please take care of me." If only I had been more discerning then, I wouldn't have felt so terrible about what was to come. Our relationship began from there. We had always been as close as friends, so our relationship progressed smoothly, and after about 6 months, Jim proposed. I thought it was a bit soon, but seeing him look at me earnestly, his ears red, and I said, "Yes." I believe everything would be okay with him. We soon told our parents. My father liked Jim's straightforwardness. Seeing my father and him getting along, I felt truly relieved and happy. On the contrary, I was quite nervous. That should be it. Jim is the president's son, so my Henry is the president of the company I worked for. I hadn't met the company president often, but he was always proper and seemed unapproachable. I was nervous, but he said,
"Belle, thank you for choosing Jim. Knowing he's with someone as reliable as you puts me and my wife at ease."
And he smiled warmly. He was completely different from the usual stern boss, more like a kind father. "Belle, I'm so happy to have a daughter like you. How did someone as sweet as you end up with Jim?" Karen was a very lively person. Hearing this, Jim chimed in.
"Mom, saying someone like Jim is a bit rude."
Surrounded by such warm people, I remember feeling very reassured. However, around this time, I started feeling uneasy about Jim. The first time I noticed it was at our wedding. We invited business partners and held a fairly large ceremony. Watching my father chatting amiably with a company president, my husband Jim whispered to me,
"Hey, Why are Henry and that president so chummy?
Looking closer, I said, Tom, wait, didn't I tell you? He's Dad's old friend, and they work at the same company. My father and Tom have been childhood friends. Dad has been contributing to his company for many years.
Huh? But shouldn't you be more conscious of your position at events like this?
That's what Jim said. It was as if he was implying that it was shameful for someone like my father to be friendly with a president. I was shocked, but didn't want to create a scene during the ceremony. What's wrong with the bride's father greeting guests? The problem was with him, that's what I thought. Even after getting married, I continued working. Seeing this, Jim said,
Now that you are the future president's wife, you should quit your job and relax as a homemaker.
It was scary how he naturally said it, thinking it was for the best, not as sarcasm. I like my job, and I think being a homemaker is definitely harder, I responded. But Jim just laughed it off, saying,
That's not true.
Jim's mother, Karen, had been a homemaker since marrying Henry. Whenever she invited us for a meal, it was always nutritious and delicious. Her home was always clean and well kept. The house had many rooms, and it seemed she cleaned that spacious place all by herself every day. I always admire how clean your rooms are. I just can't seem to keep mine tidy. As I said this with a bit of embarrassment, she replied,
That's perfectly fine, even if cut corners on days when it feels like too much. It's just that my husband has a weak bronchial tube, so I try to be careful about dust. That's all. Jim is the picture of health, just like me.
She laughed as she said this. I liked Henry and Karen. Though I disliked Jim's occasional condescending remarks, at that time I never thought about divorcing him because of them. However, an unforgivable event was about to happen in the coming months. One day, as I was working as usual, my husband appeared with a worried look, saying,
Belle, come quickly! Dad! Mom!
Seeing his face, I immediately knew it wasn't anything trivial. We hopped into a taxi and headed to the directed location. On the way, I learned from my husband that Henry and Karen had been critically injured in a car accident. He was so distraught that he could barely speak. Supporting my shaken husband, we headed to the hospital room. But the two people before us were not the warm and smiling Henry and Karen we knew. It was clear, at first glance, they would never open their eyes again. Seeing them like this, my husband couldn't hold back his tears. I realized how much he cherished them. The doctor explained that a car, driven by someone who had dozed off, veered into the opposite lane and crashed into Henry and Karen's car. From what was explained, it seemed Henry probably died on impact. Karen still barely breathing when she arrived at the hospital, worried about Henry till her last moment, and passed away. Hearing this, I couldn't stop my tears either. Many people came to their funeral. Of course, my father was there too. Tom, a business associate, also came.
It's been tough, hasn't it?
Both of them spoke to me and my husband. But while my husband greeted Tom with,
Mr. President, it's terrible. Thank you for coming today.
His response to my father was curtly,
yes.
When I said his tone was inappropriate, he replied rudely in front of my father,
I only want to talk to people who are worth it.
Tom frowned at this, but my father said,
He is probably not yet come to terms with it. You need to support him.
I thought the same, but this was the beginning of my husband's downfall. With Henry gone, it was decided that my husband, being the only son, would take over the company. On his first day back to work, he gathered all the employees and started an outrageous speech.
I'm going to stop the lax approach we've had so far. There were no quotas before, but from now on, I'll implement them, and those who can't meet them will be cut off.
He spoke like a tyrant. The employees exchanged glances, visibly disturbed. I had heard he would give a speech, but never imagined he would say something like this. I couldn't hide my shock. Back in the office, I confronted him. What was that earlier? Don't you think it was disrespectful to everyone?
Shut up. I'm the president. And if someone can't understand my way, they are useless.
That's what he said. I responded with sadness. Henry always said the employees were like family. I chose this company because I was drawn to Henry's words. I had considered joining the same company as my father, but it felt somewhat embarrassing. Flipping through the company's brochures, I came across Henry's words that employees are like family. I bet this is a wonderful company, I thought. Indeed, my colleagues all seemed to enjoy their work and held the president in high regard. When trouble arose, we didn't just blame the person involved, we covered for each other. As a newbie, I often receive help from my seniors. It's true that increasing productivity might improve our performance, but pushing too hard will naturally lead to more mistakes. We're doing fine as is, and I believe Henry's approach was best, but my husband hated it.
Family? That is too soft. Employees are just pieces. They're different from us, from me.
Who is this person? He'd always looked down on others. But realizing this was my husband's true nature, I felt I couldn't follow him anymore. What? That's terrible. Sorry, but I think James' approach is wrong. When I said this, my husband glared at me and snapped,
You're annoying!
before storming out of the room. The company became unbearable to watch after that. My husband imposed strict quotas and pushed those who couldn't meet them towards resignation. It got to the point where employees were breaking down, turning to me in tears. I'm sorry. That's all I could say. One by one, employees left until, within a half a year of my husband taking over, the staff halved. The company has turned into a completely black company, suffering from staff shortages and plummeting performance. It was getting so bad that I thought it might be better to consider closing down. It's only a matter of time. Then, I received terrible news. It was from Tom. I rushed to the hospital. Dad? There, my father, a bit thinner, lay in bed.
What's up, Belle? What about your work? Your company's in trouble, right?
Even after collapsing at work, that's what he said. The doctor's words left me in despair. Dad had pancreatic cancer.
Prepare for the worst. He might not have a year left.
Back in his room, Dad said,
Am I that bad? You were always bad at hiding things.
With a small smile. Hearing that, I burst into tears. Dad always put himself second.
My beloved father.
We talked about the old days and caught up on recent times. When I mentioned my husband's awful behavior, Dad fell silent with a puzzled look. Back home, I made a request to my husband. We barely spoke lately, and our marriage was falling apart. But I hadn't divorced him because I was worried about everyone at the company. Still, for now. Hey, Dad has cancer. He might not last a year. Can I take some time off work to be with him? I thought even he would agree, but he coldly replied,
Why? Can't believe you're saying this given the current situation.
I knew I was asking a lot, but the current situation was his fault, and I kept silent as he continued.
Besides, you're married now, part of this family. If you want to go so badly, get a divorce first.
He sneered. Then he said something unforgivable.
Besides, worrying about someone who's going to die is a waste of time. You're being stupid.
Unable to contain my anger, I pulled out a piece of paper from the drawer and thrust it at my husband, saying, Write this now. It was a divorce application, and I had already filled out my part.
Are you serious? You're such a fool. You're giving up being the CEO's wife?
While laughing unpleasantly, he signed it immediately. As I put the divorce papers in my bag, I retorted, The fool is you. What good is being a CEO's wife? Hope you don't regret this divorce. To which he replied,
No way. Just leave already.
That was the end of my marriage. Though I once loved my husband deeply, I felt no regret in leaving him. I informed him, and after one last day at work, returned to my parents' house. My father had been in and out of the hospital. On his good days, we'd go for walks or cook together. I remembered how, as a child, he used to take me fishing. Being an avid fisherman himself, he even went fishing again. There were days he seemed so well. I questioned his illness, but the disease steadily worsened, and he was hospitalized again. His decline was rapid. Half a year after my divorce, my father passed away. His last words were,
I am happy I got to spend so much time with you at the end. Now, go, find your happiness.
Many people came to my father's wake. He was such a great man, always focused on his work. There's no one else like him. Everyone was saying such kind words. Then, an out-of-place figure appeared.
Hey there.
It was my disheveled ex-husband, Jim. In a wrinkled suit of mourning, unshaven, with unkempt hair, he must have heard about Dad's passing somewhere. When I coldly asked, "What do you want?"
What do you think? Came to see David's face one last time. He was my father-in-law, after all.
Jim said this, but his gaze didn't meet mine. Instead, he looked around as if searching for someone.
Wow, what a crowd. Figures for a guy who was pals with a big corporate CEO.
Jim sneered and then rushed off towards someone he seemed to have been looking for.
Mr. CEO, long time no see. Please don't say you won't do business with us anymore.
That someone was Tom. Everyone looked puzzled by my ex-husband's inappropriate behavior. Even as I tried to usher him out, my ex-husband wouldn't budge, continuing to apologize profusely. Tom brushed off my hand, shaking his head, as if to say,
It's okay. Look at me, I'm sorry, but my mind's made up. Ever since you took over, the quality's just not been the same.
Jim seemed to understand this, yet he pleaded.
Please, I have employees to look out for.
I felt nauseous hearing such words from him, who probably didn't even believe them himself.
You're a liar, you know. Your father was a wonderful man, but what did you learn from him?
Tom spoke calmly, but his voice revealed his anger.
And that's,
He seemed oblivious to the fact that many of the attendees were former employees who had left the company because of his unreasonable actions. Everyone looked at my ex-husband with disdain.
Why?
I asked them too. Everyone is now working at Tom's company, I told my surprised ex-husband.
No matter how close our parents are, this is ridiculous.
He raised his voice, and I enlightened him with a fact. Actually, Tom's company was co-founded by my father.
I prefer the field. I don't quite get the management stuff.
With those words, the management was left to Tom, while my father focused on field operations for years. So my father and my ex-husband held the same position as co-directors.
The company's success is all thanks to Tom. It wasn't something worth mentioning at the in-laws' house.
Since my father said that, I never brought it up either. The late Henry knew this. But for some reason, my ex-husband mistakenly thought of my father as a mere employee and completely underestimated him. After graduating, I considered joining my father's company, but wanted to try on my own first. When I told my father about my ex-husband's reckless management that led to many people's unhappiness, he said,
You should work at our company.
I contacted those who had left and apologized to each one. Most of the former employees moved to my father's company when introduced. Being so close yet unable to stop my ex-husband's rampage, I felt equally guilty. I'm determined to make amends.
Your employees are fantastic. Everyone works hard with strong commitment. I'm truly grateful,
Tom said, looking at the former employees. Hearing this, everyone smiled shyly. Then, my ex-husband blurted out something outrageous.
Belle, you've been deceiving me all along. You're responsible for supporting me. This is an order.
After saying this to me, he turned to be the former employees, and we all looked at him coldly. Such a worthless apology. I calmly approached my ex-husband. Can you leave, please? And what's this comeback about? No way, we are not your pieces. I said those words firmly. My ex-husband, in tears, looked around to find everyone viewing him with disbelief.
Get out already! You're so inappropriate!
Some even hurled these words at him. Finally, getting the message, my ex-husband staggered out. I immediately apologized. I'm very sorry for the disturbance. Everyone applauded, and Tom said,
Belle, you did well,
placing his hand gently on my head. Later, I learned that my ex-husband's company had accumulated massive debts and went bankrupt. In the end, he was left alone. The late Karen once told me a story from early in our marriage. Jim used to be small and often got teased, but then he started boasting, I'm the son of a president. Hearing this, the late Henry always scolded him. But maybe my ex-husband was just a pitiable person who could only show his worth through status and power. Nevertheless, what he did was inexcusable. After the company's bankruptcy, he disappeared. I heard he was spotted living on the streets in a distant city. It's unclear, but it was probably him. As for his future and whether he'll ever reflect on his actions, I don't know. And honestly, it's none of my concern now. He's part of my past that I've moved on from. As for me, I'm still working at Tom's company alongside the former employees. The company offers great benefits, and I genuinely enjoy my work. My colleagues have become like family to me. I'm determined to continue striving in this company, preserving what my father worked so hard to build.